Mariners 2, Padres 5. The Padres came out with more pitches and the Mariners had more problems. Welcome to the Dom Skeen channel, your one-stop shop for the Mariners storylines on Seattle's minds. And I'm not even coming with the thumbnail to begin today. We're not doing anything fun or cute or whatever, right? We're 20 games in, we're 8 and 12. There's not too much to be too worried about, to be honest. But there is some trends that are they're like about halfway to concerning. My if I had like a level of concern, a worryometer, let's call it. Shout out to Fantasy Baseball today. Their podcast for doing that worryometer on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried am I? I'm like a 3 right now. I'm halfway to a 5, halfway to significant worry. If there's these certain trends, there's a lot of trends that we saw last year that went in the wrong direction, that we saw exposed in the playoffs by teams with really good scouting departments, and a lot of those problems are still present. But there's also a lot of really good things that are still present as well from last year. Do I think we're a better team than this year? That's the hard part to say. I can't guarantee you we're going to win a whole lot more than 90 to 92 games. I picked 92 games. I think that's where this team is at. I don't think this is a 100-win team. That's not anything that we didn't already know. Obviously moves can be made at the deadline. I think Luis Castillo got unlucky today. But I'm going to show you why I think what I think. Obviously, Mariners lose 5-2, get out hit 10-7, out hit on expected batting average 311 to 257. So Padres definitely put up plenty of hits, especially just for one dreadful second inning where Luis Castillo gets all the damage done on him. It's 4 runs in the second inning, and after that, the Mariners, go get 2 runs back in the 6th after getting shut out by Walker Buehler for 5 innings. They get 2 runs on him basically before he records an out, which is lovely. And then they get Bradley Rodriguez. I think usually I know how to pronounce these names, but Bradley with the G in there. Rodriguez, gets an 1 out, gives up another hit, walks another guy, and the traffic keeps moving for the Mariners. Then Adrian Morejon comes in and gets 2 outs. The Mariners pinch hit Connor Joe for Luke Raley with the bases loaded. And Luke Raley is the hottest hitter on the team. You see, he's batting 328, OPS over 1,000. That move is going. I knew as soon as it happened, it's going to get criticized because Connor Joe, minor league guy who's only played in 1 game so far for the Mariners. A guy who's had experience in the majors, is a better righty versus lefty matchup in his career than Luke Raley. Raley having like a 42 WRC plus and a 182 batting average versus Connor Joe. Being a righty that really, is meant to be that platoon guy that hits the lefties. And Morejon throwing 100 miles an hour. It's tough, but you look back through the years, like when Connor Joe was good, like he's never had a super high batting average. His best ability is to hit the lefties, though. That's always been, if he was good at something, it's always going to be hitting the lefties. You bring in your righty bat, but at this point, is your righty bat even worth it when you've got Luke Raley swinging the bat so hot? He does whiff a ton. He does swing and miss a ton. It's just like we'd rather go down with the guy who's been swinging a hot bat, even if it's only really versus the righties. It's tough. We're going to get into that a little bit more later. But the main story in this game, Luis Castillo, 5 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, 10 hard hits on 98 pitches. You only get San Diego to use 144 pitches. You only get you to use 135, but they get plenty of their offense done early. And only, 4 runs to only 1 earned run. Luis Castillo's expected stats are much better than his actual stats. You can see, he's keeping things in the zone quite a bit. He's pitching in the zone. And I think there was good signs of a good Luis Castillo in this start, despite what felt like a really poor second inning that, then he kind of escapes after that and settles in a bit. There is some really good signs here. And this start was a mixed bag. Really poor strikeout to walk ratio, 3-3, right? But I love the 16 changeups that are being thrown here. If Luis Castillo is throwing 16 changeups per start, and he only gets 1 swinging strike on those, I felt like I jinxed it because I tweeted about it and said, "Oh, he's already got a swinging strike on, and he's already thrown 3 changeups after the first inning." And then he goes on to get no more swinging strikes, throw 13 more. Um, and every single one of his pitches kind of, got hard hit, other than the sinker barely didn't get hard hit, barely stayed under 90 miles an hour, average exit velocity. But, I mean, still, 5 hard hits on the night on 35 of them. He was mixing up his pitches pretty well. I think the pitch mix has something in it for Luis Castillo, and he's definitely been unlucky. Didn't get a lot of swing and miss at 7 on 98 pitches. The horizontal and vertical break is there on his pitches, and he didn't actually throw too many pitches in these innings. He got lit up in the second, still only used 24 pitches. And if it weren't for a couple errors, which they happen, they wouldn't have all been earned runs. One earned run in this start. You wouldn't have had 4 runs allowed. He can get really comfortable and be like, that's where we see him being a top 10 to 15 arm in the major leagues, when he can throw all sorts of 16 changeups. That's money. Where it's also worth noting, he's being BABIP so far in 2026 and massively underperforming his expected stats. This is coming into tonight. Shout out to Fangraphs for all these numbers. They haven't updated with tonight's current xERA and stuff like that, but we're definitely going to look at that once they do. And his fielding independent pitching on an ERA scale 3.16. So without the fielding, he goes, his actual ERA 6.92 would be 3.16. His xFIP, so expected fielder independent pitching, where home runs are calculated on 10% of fly balls induced, right? 3.65, as compared to his actual ERA being 6.92. So he's actually maybe been a little bit lucky on not allowing fly balls, but in terms of errors and in terms of fielding, it hasn't necessarily been the greatest behind him. Expected ERA of 4.92, still not anywhere close to even based on the fielding and everything he's had, still wasn't quite where it's 2 runs lower than the 6.92. So it's just something that can talk you off the ledge with Luis Castillo. His actual ERA is down to a 5.4 after tonight, with just 1 earned run in 5 and third innings pitched. But some ERA stats hate him. Some like him based on his 2026 so far. The ERA based ones, the expected ERA doesn't love him, but the fielding independent pitching stuff actually kind of likes him. Regression to and it's not like a hate, it's just like the way that these models see him. And regression to the mean would be probably a mid to high 3s ERA. Last year it was like a 3.54. That's, I think, where he's headed for this year anyway. And this start was, like I said, the start was a mixed bag. Poor strikeout to walk ratio at 3-3. Really bad inning. Lots of hits allowed, and I should have said lots of hard hits allowed too. 10 on 98 pitches, but it didn't get as ugly as it could have. This could get ugly. In the second inning, it didn't get quite as ugly as it could have. The Mariners still had a chance to win this game. I'm not in love with the stuff like I used to be. In terms of his stuff is kind of regressed to being, it's okay. It's kind of average now. It's a little better than average. I see him getting hit hard though, and not striking guys out as much. So if you're not inducing weak contact and you're not striking guys out as much, then we've got a problem. But I do think he's getting back to that version who we saw against the Yankees in his first start, and who we saw the Mariners trade for and have be the ace of the rotation for a while, because the changeup is making a comeback. If he has that, he can get a whole lot more strikeouts. He can get a whole lot more comfortable. When you only have 3 pitches, that's reliever pitch mix. That is the same 3 pitches that Andres Munoz has, and he goes 1 inning. To face this lineup 3 times, right, is going to be difficult. There's just not much craftiness that you can do. You can't be that crafty. You can't be that unexpected. And this stuff is still interesting, in terms of, when the stuff is like pretty good but not amazing with 3 pretty kind of uniform pitches, like standard pitches. Obviously not the standard version of these pitches, but standard pitches overall in a sinker or 4-seam and a changeup, or sinker 4-seam slider. Then it's going to be tough to be crafty. Walker Buehler, on the other hand, he's out here after his second Tommy John, throwing 7 different pitches. Back in 2017, he was throwing 98 miles an hour, as Angie Mentink said on the broadcast tonight. Shout out Angie. However, like now he's just throwing the kitchen sink approach, and he's always had a whole lot of pitches, a deep arsenal, and that's what he's using. But now it's like he doesn't have one overpowering pitch. He really doesn't have like any overpowering pitch, but 7 different pitches, only 88 total, 7 different pitches, all used at least 6 times in this one. You see the percentages right there, and then 12 swinging strikes. 4 on 16 knuckle curves, right? Then you've got some on the sweeper, some on the cutter, different pitches getting in there, and just all being different sorts of things, and throwing pretty much every one to both sides of the plate except for the changeup. So, you look at this from Walker Buehler. He's only throwing 48% in the zone. He's still staying away from the zone. Same thing that Randy Vasquez and Michael King did. And there's starting to be a book on the Mariners, which we're going to talk about in a minute. 20 games into the year, he escapes only throwing 21 pitches the most in a single inning. But and having some pretty good innings in here. But he kitchen sinked us to death is what he did. 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 earned. 7 strikeouts to 1 walk, though, and just 5 hard hits on 88 pitches. The Mariners strung together hit after hit to knock him out in that 6th inning. They finally get him out of there without him getting a single out. It's like, okay, 4 hits off the bat. And that was, 3 hits like right off the bat against him. And that's before he gets an out. And that was 3 of his 5 hits. Only 2 came before that. Then you get, so you string together all those hits. 4 out of 16 swinging strikes on the knuckle curve. That was the pitch that they were struggling with. The broadcasters, you could hear Angie and Aaron being like, "Yeah, that curveball, wow." But he's prioritizing this cutter, and this Mariners lineup still hates certain breaking balls. There's still, just like last year, that was a problem. You went out and this offseason you said we're not going to go and we're not going to be able to go get Kyle Tucker, which obviously would have fixed a lot of these problems, but you didn't have a chance to get Kyle Tucker. Nobody did except for the Dodgers. If you're being honest, you would have had to shell out so much money apparently there was about $20 million to spend this offseason. I think the Mariners spent that money pretty well, but the real book on the Mariners offense right now is you look at through 20 games. Okay, we're about an eighth of the way through the season. The Mariners have 721 total plate appearances. So that, Julio had about 710 last year. This is about a season's worth of plate appearances. This is, as of tonight, you get over that number, over that 700 number too. So now you've got about a season's worth of plate appearances of like a full everyday player playing 162 pretty much. They're a little bit above average on the fastball. They're a little bit, tiny bit above average on the cutter. But then the splitter, they're pretty far below average. The sinker, a little bit below. Slider, a whole lot below. They're terrible at hitting the slider so far in 2026. And they have faced some nasty sliders, from, facing the Yankees and stuff, facing the Guardians, now facing the Padres, Mason Miller and stuff. Even like Reed Detmer's slider was pretty good. So you face some good sliders, but that's no excuse. And this stuff can normalize over time, but you got a whole season's worth of plate appearances from different Mariners hitters to say this is where the team's at right now. It's at least a snapshot, and you're a tiny bit above average against the curveball, and then also the knuckle curve, and then you're below average against the changeup. So the rank versus different pitch types out of 30 MLB teams. Fastball, you're 11th out of 30 MLB teams. So the Mariners were good at hitting the fastball last year. They're still good. Cutter, 17th. Okay, not where you want to be, but the cutter has been something they've struggled with last year. Kind of trend continues. Splitter, they were overwhelmed by the splitter from Trey Savage last year and Kevin Gausman in the playoffs. And this year, unfortunately, is no different. 29th against the splitter. That is the worst pitch. If you're going against the Mariners, you got a splitter, you're in for a treat. If you're the opposing team. Sinker, you're 10th against it, actually. There's only like 7 teams who are above average against the sinker. Slider, you're 27th. You're really doing poorly against the slider. And you're going to see a lot of sliders these days, including the sweeper, including the slider. you're really going to see a lot of sliders, and you're 27th against it. That's something that, how do you improve that is the question. Curveball 16th, so right in the middle. Knuckle curve, you're 6th at hitting the knuckle curve. Obviously, there's not too many knuckle curves, so one of the lesser, like, there's less data, that is normalized with. And then you're 21st against the changeup. Now, I'll give you a moment to guess. The same team leads the MLB against the sinker, the slider, and the changeup. I'll give you 5 seconds to guess who it is. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Los Angeles Dodgers. Of course, the Dodgers and that murderer's row lineup, they are they're number 1 in the MLB at hitting the sinker, the slider, and the changeup. And then the splitter, let's see where they're at in the splitter. They are 11th at hitting the splitter. Anyway, when you get a really expensive lineup, you're not playing too many platoons. I mean, you've got guys who can see that slider and that changeup from a mile away, let alone a sinker, right? That stuff is just not fooling these guys. The Mariners are trying to bring Cole Young up to speed, get him up there. They're trying to bring, Luke Raley as a platoon bat. You're trying to really get the most out of him. Obviously not putting him in the platoon, outside of that platoon role to face a lefty, which we saw tonight with Morahone, which we're going to talk about at the end for a minute. But that's where you're at right now on, with your lineup. You're just not the Los Angeles Dodgers. You're going to have to crush the fastball. And the Mariners went with this strategy last year, and look how it turned out. I'm so close to the World Series. I do believe with Brendan Ottman, full year of Josh Naylor, right? This lineup is going to be better on a per game basis, in the long run as well. There's not a spot in the lineup that I really still would, go out and replace. I know that MLB Network threw out a trade idea for Fernando Tatis Jr., right? I know that there's possibilities, that could be floated towards the trade deadline of trading Luis Castillo, especially if he gets on a roll, and trying to get another an everyday bat in this lineup. If you can get a 6th everyday bat in this lineup, it's just like, let's make sure that it's not better than the platoons we already have, which I know nobody wants to hear after watching Connor Joe. You've already, lost Victor Robles due to injury for a little while. And then you've got Rob Refsnyder on paternity leave, and he also doesn't have a hit yet for the Mariners, an 1/8 of the way through the season. But these things do get better, is the answer. And the right answer is never sexy. Almost never sexy, right? The right answer is almost never sexy. These things do get better over time. And how do you solve this, right? You can't just take more reps or try harder, right? You can't just face a competitive splitter, slider, or changeup in batting practice. You can't just face, some just demon 90-mile-an-hour splitter. You can't face some disgusting 88-mile-an-hour slider. You can't face some 88-mile-an-hour changeup like in batting practice. You just can't, especially these pitchers are trying to make theirs different. And you can't, so you're not going to get better against these individual pitchers with, more practice in batting practice or the cage, or it's going to be taking more of these live reps in the games. And I know this isn't what people want to hear for a team with World Series aspirations, but it's just where you're at right now. I would still be comfortable picking the Mariners to make the World Series. And at that point, right, anything can happen, even if the Dodgers are so good at hitting sliders and changeups and whatnot. But how do you solve this? That is the question. And really, it's like, okay, I say, let's go to a quarter into the year. Once you're a quarter through the year, mid-May, 40 games out of 162, that's when we can really start to say, okay, is this just a slow start? Or now if something's happened for 40 games in a row, we have to consider it somewhat of a significant trend. So we'll revisit it then. But as for now, this is where we're at. And we're going to revisit this 40 games in. And now the Raley versus Connor Joe debate, just to finish us off. Adrian Morahone comes into the game. He's a lefty. The Mariners are absolutely, they're cruising. They're surging in that 6th inning. and then you bring in, they got the bases loaded, one out. Luke Raley, the hottest bat on the team, is up. Is coming up to the plate, and but then San Diego brings in a lefty to plan around Luke Raley, and Dan Wilson goes to his bench, brings in Connor Joe, who has only been in one game so far for the Mariners, and hasn't done, wasn't able to do anything. Doesn't necessarily show you any signs on the outside that say, okay, this guy's gonna be, the right. I mean, this guy's is really, going to be awesome in this clutch opportunity. And you can have all the want to in the world, but Connor Joe comes in, he strikes out. He's gets overmatched by 9,900 miles an hour from Adrian Morahone. It's just like, I'm going to pitch you up and in, and even though you have the platoon advantage against me, you're not going to be able to hit this. And yeah, it was unsettling to watch because it's like, emotionally, to take out the hot hitter and the hot hand. But Luke Raley does have a 48 career WRC plus versus the lefties, and he also has a 182 batting average career versus lefties. So, is it surprising that he didn't hit there? No, not at all. And then J.P. Crawford comes in. He grounds out, and you miss your bases loaded opportunity to basically tie the game up with a hit. I don't know. Adrian Morahone goes 3 pitches, strikes out Connor Joe. The results and the feeling of fans is going to be tough on this one, but I don't know what to say other than, if you were gonna, I don't like criticizing Dan Wilson. Dan Wilson clearly has a reason for this. It's handedness. Obviously the matchup. I'm like that's got to be it, like really it, right? In the post-game press conference, he doesn't throw his players under the bus, which I actually prefer. He says he was putting together good at-bats in spring training, and we thought, that he was a good option here. And it is what it is, right? This is what you, Morahone is tough in general. Connor Joe had solid at-bats in spring training. Shout out to Jake Race the Trident for tweeting that out. Everybody's really upset, right, in Mariners social media spaces, but I encourage you, don't go too much into these Mariners social media spaces. If you can't handle some emotions and stuff, that's really what you're going to see, is the emotions of people that want this team to win. It doesn't mean that they know exactly the specific baseball reason. No, sometimes seeing the sausage made is not fun, but it is what it is. I don't want to be too defensive of this move, because even I was like, can't you just try letting Luke Raley hit the lefty right now? He's so unbelievably hot at the plate. Even if he strikes out on 3 pitches, even if he grounds into a double play, giving him, the guy whose bat is absolutely on fire, a chance, even if it's all been against righties, would feel good. So I don't know. Dan Wilson was the manager of the year last year, so anybody questioning his credentials, I think that I don't agree with at all, but I understand why people are upset. Can't we just try it? Can't we just try it one time? That's kind of the question. It's a stupid question, but man, the comments, let me know what you would do in the Raley versus Joe debate. Let me know also, here's a better question. Why do you think Dan Wilson did it? Why do you think Dan Wilson did it? Because he says, he has his reasoning that Joe took some good at-bats in spring training, that Morahone is tough in general. Why don't you think he just said, why don't you think he's willing to just say, screw it, let Luke Raley go out there and have a shot at it? Obviously, and then later Joe hits it really hard. He hits it like 99.9 miles an hour into left field, 600 expected batting average. Almost drives in a couple runs. It's just tough. There's some bad luck. That's baseball. It is what it is. You got to get back out there. The good news is, you get back to home. The bad news is you go back up against Texas and the 3 starting pitchers who you got swept by in Texas. But back to home sweet home for the Mariners. 1-8 on the road this year, and what is it like? I mean, it's good at home now, right? It's like, I mean, you're 4 plus 3 and 4. Yeah, you're like 7-3 or 7-4 at home this year. So hopefully, another sweep with the Rangers coming into town. That would feel real good to sweep both Texas teams at home, get like a 7-game home win streak, while on an 8-game road losing streak. That would just be hilarious. But it's never as good or as bad as you think it is. Emotions run high, but I mean, it's a long season. You're an eighth of the way through now, and as long as you go 1-0 every pitch, stay stoic, and give all glory to God, who I think that the stoic of the week is definitely, got to give it to Mariners broadcaster Angie Mentink. Shout out Angie, you do an awesome job, and all the kerfuffle that blew up today, it's just hilarious. I hope people are paying more attention on a national level to what she does, because I'm actually a big fan of her broadcast. They are incredibly human, and that's my favorite part about them. And that's all I got to say there. That's the stoic of the week. She goes 1-0 every pitch, stays stoic, and gives all glory to God. Let's not get too high or too low. And as long as you do those things, you can't lose. It's also the one thing I wanted to add to all that is it's going to take 1 through 26. It's going to take everybody on the roster. So in the spirit of that, I'm not going to rip Connor Joe too much. You might need him tomorrow. Who knows? You might just need him tomorrow. And in that case, I'm not going to be like, oh, why'd you bring Connor Joe into the game? I'm going to say, you know what? There's a reason for this. These guys obviously care. These guys are not trying to sabotage the team. Dan Wilson. I mean, if anybody loves the Mariners, it's the guy who, I mean, Dan Wilson didn't even have to be the manager, right? He's already in the Mariners Hall of Fame. He was already on the 116 win 2001 team. But he does it because he cares. And in his spirit, faith, hope, and love are the 3 things that he listed off with why you can make a run in the playoffs. Let's take faith, hope, and love into this weekend series. That being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. Go M's.